If you're practicing for the math portion of the SHSAT, I have a bunch of mini practice tests for you. So click the link that's in the description of this video, put away your calculator, take out a timer and set it to 8 minutes because there's only 5 questions on each of these little tests, and that'll help you with your pacing for the real test, right? So here we go, practice test number 1. The first question gives us this parallelogram and it asks us to find the value of x. So when I'm given a problem like this, I like to look at the angles that are around the one that's in question and see what's related to it. Is there anything supplementary to it, complementary to it? And the first thing I notice is that this adjacent angle is 90 degrees, all right? Then as I keep looking at the figure, I notice that this angle x that they're looking for, added to this angle q that's inside the parallelogram, added to that angle 90, altogether make a circle. And that helps me come up with a little equation because I know that every circle is 360 degrees. So now what I realize is that all I really need to find out is what angle Q is because I already have the other two values in this equation, all right? So now I'm looking for how can I get Q? So when you look at this figure and you look at what other angles in this figure are related to Q, hopefully you know that in a parallelogram, opposite angles are congruent. So this angle that I'm highlighting in red right here is the same measure as angle Q. So if I can find that red angle, then I found Q. So it's kind of this constant pattern of what do I need and how do I get it? So I need Q, how do I get it? With this red angle. I need this red angle, how do I get it? So now if you look around, you notice that this 72 degree angle is supplementary to the red angle. Together they make a line, and a line is 180 degrees. So I know that if I do 180 degrees minus 72, that will give me the measure of the red angle. So that red angle is 108 degrees. So if this guy is 108 degrees, like we talked about just a minute ago, that means that angle Q is also 108 degrees. So now that I found angle Q, I can go back into that original, and let me just erase this. I can go into the original equation that I wrote, and I can substitute Q with the 108 degrees. So now I have 108 degrees plus 90 degrees plus x degrees equals 360. And this is an equation that I'm sure you can solve. So now I have x plus 198 equals 360. I'm subtracting 198 from both sides, and I get x equals 162. All right, number 59, the owner of a tree farm plants pine trees and oak trees in a ratio of 8:3. I'm going to stop and annotate immediately. I'm given a ratio, and I know that in a ratio, the order is very important. So I want to know what that 8 represents and what that 3 represents. So the type of tree that came first is going to be the 8. So it was written as pine trees and oak trees, meaning that the 8 represents the pine trees and the 3 represents the oak trees. All right, now it's asking me how many oak trees are planted if 264 pine trees are planted. So that means that we want to create an equivalent ratio. What would be an equal ratio to 8/3 where 264 is the number of pine trees instead of the 8? So again, order matters. I have to make sure that 264 goes in the right place. The pine trees were in the numerator, so the pine trees are going to stay in the numerator. So 264 over. I don't know how many oak trees, so I use a variable to represent the fact that I don't know, and I'm trying to find the number of oak trees. Now you have a proportion, and you have a couple of different options for how you want to solve this proportion. You can find out how many times 8 goes into 264 and then multiply 3 by that same number. So remember, you don't have a calculator on the SHSAT, so if you come over on the side, we can do the multiplication, and we'll find out that 8 goes into 264 33 times. So that means that if I multiply 3 by 33, I'll find the value of x. So there are 99 oak trees. All right. Another way you could have solved this is for a proportion, you can cross multiply. So I could have gone 8 times x equals 8x, and then 3 times 264, and then you solve a one-step equation. So your choice on how you want to solve that. Number 60, for what value of w is 4w equals 2w minus 8? So I'm going to try to get the variable to one side. I can do minus 4w on both sides, but that wouldn't make sense because then it will leave the left side with no variable. So I'm going to go minus 2w minus 2w. When I subtract 2w from both sides, I'll make this a little bigger for you. It's going to give me 2w on the left, bring down my equal sign. 2w minus 2w is 0, so it cancels itself out. And I'm going to bring down that minus 8, not forgetting that minus sign that was before the 8. Now I have a one-step equation. W is being multiplied by 2, so I'm going to divide to do the inverse and get rid of it. And whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. And negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. So the value of W is negative 4. Number 61, a survey asked students what pets they have. Based on the results, the following statements are all true. 20 students have cats, 23 have dogs, 3 students have both dogs and cats, 5 students have no dogs or cats. How many students were surveyed? So what we have to realize is that in these first two categories, the students who say they have dogs or cats, where there seem to be 43 students, this next group of 3, they actually counted twice, right? They were counted both in this first category of students who say they have cats, and they also counted in the category of students who said that they have dogs. So we're going to have to subtract these 3 from the sum of 43 to give us 40. And then we can add those 5 students who said that they have no cat or dog. So there were 45 students in total that were surveyed, all right? If you need a little more concrete of a way to look at this, we can look at this as saying we have to add up the students who have only dogs plus the students who have only cats plus the students who have both plus the students who have neither, all right? So the neither is easy. We know that 5 students have neither, and the both is easy. We know that that's 3 students. But now when we look at only cats, well, the students that have only cats is going to be the 20 students who said they have a cat minus the 3 who also have a dog, right? So there's only 17 students who have only a cat. Those additional 3 have a cat and dog. That's why they counted that 20. And then for the only dog, well, there's 23 students who have dogs, but 3 of those kids also have a cat. So the kids who only have a dog, that's going to be 20 students. So 20 with only a dog, 17 with only a cat, 3 with both, and 5 with neither. And when we add all of these numbers up, we're going to get 45 as well. So whichever way makes more sense to you. Number 62, the sum of 2 consecutive integers is negative 15. So consecutive integers are just integers that are back to back, that are separated by 1. So numbers like 7 and 8, 11 and 12, negative 5 and negative 4, right? So they're saying that the sum of 2 consecutive integers is negative 15. Sum, of course, being addition. And when I add these 2 numbers up, I'm going to get negative 15. If 1 is added to the smaller integer and 2 is subtracted from the larger integer, what is the product of the 2 resulting integers? I'm going to focus back on that first sentence for now, because until I find the 2 consecutive integers, I can't do anything with the rest of it, all right? So let's come up with an equation to represent that first sentence. I need variables first. So I'm going to say that x is going to represent the smaller integer of the 2, all right? Now, if x represents a smaller integer, how would you represent that next integer, the next consecutive number that comes after x? Well, all I have to do is add 1 to it. So if x is a smaller one, then x plus 1 is the bigger integer out of those 2. So now the problem is saying that the sum of those 2, so if I add those 2 up, so if I add x, being the smaller integer, with x plus 1, the bigger integer, I would get negative 15. That's what that first sentence says. The sum of those 2 is negative 15. Now here's an equation that I know how to solve, right? So I'm going to combine like terms. 2x plus 1 equals negative 15. I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides to give me 2x equals negative 16. I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides to get me x equals negative 8. Now remember, x was my smaller integer. So I've already found out what that smaller integer was. So the smaller integer is negative 8. Well, if I know the smaller one, I also know the bigger one, because the bigger one is negative 8 plus 1. So the bigger one is negative 7, right? It's that next number on the number line. All right, now that I found those 2 integers, I'm going to read the rest of this problem and see what they want me to do with them. So it says, if 1 is added to the smaller integer, so they want me to add 1 to the negative 8. So if I add 1 to the negative 8, I'm going to get negative 7. And 2 is subtracted from the larger integer. So they want me to take 2 away from the negative 7, because that's the bigger one out of those 2. And if I do that, I get negative 9. Then it's asking me, what is the product meaning multiplication, of the two resulting integers? So here's my two resulting integers. They want the product of that, and when I multiply those, I get 63. All right, that was the last one out of this first little practice test. So if there was any of these problems that I went over and you didn't understand the explanation, you still have some questions, please feel free to leave it in the comment section, and I will see you when we go over practice test number 2.